It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10 live from Jerusalem. As President Trump warns Iran, our patience is wearing thin. He tells the Iranian Supreme Leader, "We know where you're hiding," and demands unconditional surrender. His intervention came on a fifth day of missile exchanges between Iran and Israel, with targets hit inside Israel. And more strikes too inside Iran. The IDF says missile launchers and radars were hit. Meanwhile, in Gaza, at least 51 people waiting for aid are reportedly killed as Israeli troops open fire.
Also ahead on Sky News at 10.
The ayes to the right, 379. The noes to the left, 137. So the ayes have it. Unlock!
MPs back calls to decriminalise women who have abortions in England and Wales. The Prime Minister takes aim at Tory leader Kenny Badenoch over grooming gangs. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight.
Good evening from Jerusalem. President Trump has waded into the conflict between Israel and Iran, issuing a direct threat against the Iranian Supreme Leader. Demanding an unconditional surrender, Mr. Trump said the United States knows where Ali Khamenei is hiding and its patience is wearing thin. Tonight, it's reported that Mr. Trump is considering a range of options, including U.S. military action, as Iran and Israel continue to exchange missile fire. Our U.S. correspondent Mark Stone reports from the White House.
Leaving world leaders on the world stage, an early out from the G7 for a president and a crisis that he is allowing to play out quite intentionally in public. Trump's language and actions are purposely ambiguous. He flew back a day early to Washington to convene his National Security Council with words and social media posts intended to stoke tension, to confuse, and to apply intense pressure.
What specifically is better than a ceasefire? What are you looking for here?
An end, a real end, not a ceasefire, an end.
So something that would be permanent?
Yeah, or giving up entirely. That's okay too.
Are you close there? Is that possible in the next 24
Why not? Certainly possible. Complete give up. That's possible, yeah.
A lasting end to the four-day war between Israel and Iran. Certainly possible, said the president. But he is facing pressure from Israel and some in his own party to go further. The fact that feared mass casualties from Iran's counterstrikes in Israel have not materialized is influencing his choices. Trump's departure from Alberta has left the world and even world leaders trying to calculate his next move.
It sounds like an American attack could be imminent. Do you know what's going on?
Well, I don't think you should read into that an American attack is imminent.
He's calling the Security Council together.
We had a 2-hour discussion with the President last night on the Middle East, on this very issue. And as a result of that, the G7 statement came out very clear about the risk of the nuclear program in Iran, Israel's right to self-defense, and the need to de-escalate across the region, including in Gaza.
But it was on social media that he conducted his version of statecraft, his art of the deal and maximum pressure diplomacy combined. He posted, "We know exactly where the so-called Supreme Leader is hiding. He is an easy target, but he's safe there. We're not going to take him out, kill, at least not for now. But we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Our patience is wearing thin." And then a couple of minutes later, he followed with unconditional surrender. "We know," he said, "and we have complete control over the skies in Iran. America's involvement, it seems ever more likely." And to that point, the vice president seemingly preparing Trump's base in America, so reticent about intervention abroad with the prospect of war. POTUS has been amazingly consistent over 10 years that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, Vance wrote. He said repeatedly that this would happen one of two ways, the easy way or the other way. He may decide he needs to take further action to end Iranian enrichment. That decision ultimately belongs to the president. This is then a game of smoke, mirrors, brinkmanship, and maybe bluff. In Tehran, what's left of the leadership is watching all this and trying to work out what's next. It was just a few weeks ago in the Middle East that Donald Trump said the days of foreign intervention in the region were at an end. Things feel very different here now.
We'll be speaking to Mark in a moment, but as President Trump weighs his options, Israel and Iran have continued to engage fire for a fifth day. Israel says it killed Iran's wartime chief of staff after his predecessor was killed in the opening phase of the conflict. Meanwhile, Iran says it has hit Israel's military intelligence directorate and an operational center of the country's intelligence agency, Mossad. Sky's Cordelia Lynch reports from Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv's skyline and the familiar sounds of an Iranian salvo. Another wave of missiles in a conflict with no clear off-ramp. One that's playing out on people's doorsteps, here quite literally. This is Zema in central Israel and the smoking remains of an Iranian attack. Israel also seems far from backing down. This strike in Isfahan, and it's claiming to have killed Iran's new wartime chief of staff too, destroying the new guard days after taking out the old, and not ruling out toppling the supreme leader either.
I came here to strengthen the residents of Herzliya and to send a clear message to the dictator in Tehran, Khamenei. If you continue to commit acts of war and launch missiles at the civilian population in Israel, your fate will be exactly like that of the dictator in the neighbouring country to Iran, whose end is well known.
A veiled warning he could meet the same fate as Saddam Hussein, Iraq's former leader. Tehran is talking tough too. The state broadcaster defiantly celebrating a return to the studio on the same day it was bombed. Iran claims it's also hit military and intelligence targets in Israel. Israel has yet to respond, and the military has banned any broadcast of those sites. But not ones like this, civilian, and it would appear unintended. A bus parking lot in Herzliya. In one strike, Amar says he lost his life's work. Do you fear this conflict with Iran?
We need peace. We need to work. We need to live like humans, not in war. The last 2 years, all we can do is follow the news and worry about the future of the country.
The missile hit here in the morning. It felt like a slight shift in rhythm. Most people we've been speaking to have come to expect attacks overnight, but this caught some off guard. It's perhaps part of a broader psychological strategy by Iran to make Israel look exposed, but the Iranian regime still looks firmly on the back foot. On the ground, there are no signs of capitulation or compromise, and plenty of scope for miscalculation. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Tel Aviv, Israel.
Let's go straight to our Mark Stone, who joins me from the White House. And Mark, we know that Donald Trump has been meeting with his top advisors in the Situation Room, and we're hearing that all options are now on the table.
Yes, we haven't seen Donald Trump at all today since he made that early exit from the G7 overnight. He has been very active on social media, but no, we haven't seen him visually. We know that he has had a meeting of his National Security Council. It lasted around about an hour, and following that we were told that he is keeping a range of options, including a possible US strike on Iran, on the table. We have seen his officials leaving from the side door of the West Wing here after the meeting. A lot of people in that Security Council meeting. There is still a Marine on the door, so the president is still in the West Wing. It is very, very hard to gauge where he might land on this, because he is being pulled in multiple different directions, and his instincts are conflicted as well, I think. There's no question about that. This is a man who has been quite clear through the campaign and through his presidency. He wants to stop wars, not start them. And yet he is also someone who enjoys as I said in my report, the art of the deal, and he is now applying this maximum pressure brinkmanship policy to such a delicate issue, marching everyone up to the top of the hill. Whether he's prepared to go for it or march them back down again, it is very, very hard to tell. But these are tense times indeed, Yalda.
Yeah, very much so. Mark, thank you so much. Well, as we've been hearing, Donald Trump appears to be weighing up whether to bring the United States directly into this conflict. The Israelis could ask for American help in destroying a key Iranian nuclear site. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, has been looking at the options available to them.
If the United States is to join in with this war, then there's a fair bet it will involve the Fordo nuclear facility. It is Iran's most heavily protected nuclear location, 20 miles northeast of the holy city of Qom. It's an obvious and important target for Israel's attacks, although observers say there are no visible signs of damage there so far. It's a top-secret hideaway, and it's in remote terrain. The main part of the facility is built into a mountain with tunnels leading deep underground. There are few signs of activity above ground, with one support building and a fortified, secure perimeter. The main enrichment halls are buried deep below the surface, too deep for any Israeli bombs to penetrate. The nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, recently suggested Iran has increased production of enriched uranium to 60% at Fordo. The more enriched uranium they have, the more likely that Iran will be able to produce a nuclear weapon. So if their own aerial bombs won't be enough to totally destroy Fordo, what other options do the Israelis have?
The cleanest option would be to ask the United States Air Force to finish the job there. Another option would be to negotiate with the Iranians about the future of Fordo, maybe in exchange for a ceasefire agreement. The Iranians would agree to disable it themselves. The Israelis could also send in a commando team.
If the United States was to help Israel bomb Fordo, what would they be using? The answer is almost certainly the MOP, the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, officially known as the GBU-57. It's America's largest non-nuclear bomb, a bunker buster designed to blast its way through layers of rock and reinforced concrete to obliterate its target. The bomb itself weighs 13 tons, and each one could penetrate up to 60 metres below the surface. Because of its size, it can only be carried by America's B-2 stealth bombers. So if we see more B-2s heading towards the region, that may be a sign that something is about to happen. There are also reports of a lot of US aircraft on the move, F-15 and F-16 fighter jets and their refuelling planes heading from bases in Europe towards the Middle East. Is President Trump preparing for this conflict to widen? Or is he using military might to force Iranians to accept peace on his terms and promise never again to build the bomb? Because experts say whatever Israel does to Fordo, destroying it would only set Iran's nuclear ambitions back by 5 years or perhaps a few more. Ending its nuclear plans for good would require defeat on crushing terms dictated by America and Israel, or the end of the regime, or perhaps even both.
That's our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn there. Let's just turn now to the situation in Gaza. And at least 51 Palestinians are reported to have been killed and more than 200 wounded while trying to access humanitarian aid in the southern city of Khan Yunis. Palestinian witnesses say that Israeli forces were responsible for the deaths. Israel says the IDF opened fire when a crowd approached soldiers. And a warning, this report from our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle contains images you may find distressing.
The world's focus might now be on Israel's war with Iran, but Israel's other war on Gaza hasn't let up for a moment. Today, once again, dozens were killed as they waited for aid. Claimed they were targeted by Israeli artillery. The IDF said they opened fire when a crowd approached soldiers. Hundreds more were wounded. They were taken to Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, one of the only functioning hospitals left in southern Gaza. Many had to be treated on the floor. The hospital is overwhelmed with casualties. Streaks of blood covered the tiles. There are not enough bandages and medical equipment to cope with the number of wounded.
We were waiting for aid, over 50,000 civilians, when 2 mortars fell in the centre of the crowd. The number of martyrs is overwhelming. No one is able to reach them for treatment.
An American doctor recently arrived in Gaza described what he was seeing.
The first couple of days, we were seeing a lot of isolated injuries, head or chest or abdomen. But today, it's reported that tanks have been used at the food distribution centers, which makes sense because we're seeing multi-trauma. We're seeing head, neck, chest, abdomen, extremities, many, many deaths. And it just doesn't have to be this way. You know, this is something that's just got to stop.
Little aid is getting into Gaza, sometimes only 40 or 50 trucks a day. Palestinians have to walk through Israeli military-controlled areas to get food from distribution centres. Shootings have happened almost daily. It is a dangerous journey to get basic needs. But they have no choice. The war with Iran seems to have ended any hope of an imminent ceasefire in Gaza. It has distracted foreign governments and therefore eased international pressure on Israel to agree an urgent truce. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Well, we'll continue to follow all the developments here from the ground. But for now, Barbara, back to you in the studio.
Yelda, thank you. MPs have voted in support of plans to decriminalise abortion in England and Wales. The issue still has to go through the House of Lords, but it paves the way for no woman to go to prison for their own termination. Our political correspondent, Serena Barker-Singh, reports.
Outside Parliament, anti-abortion protesters gather. Inside, a step towards the biggest change to reproductive rights in England and Wales in over 50 years.
The ayes to the right, 379. The noes to the left, 137.
An amendment brought by Tonia Antoniazzi passed through the Commons, meaning women can no longer be criminalised for their own abortion.
Originally passed by an all-male parliament, elected by men alone, this Victorian law is increasingly used against vulnerable women and girls. Since 2020, more than 100 women have been criminally investigated. 6 have faced court and 1 has been sent to prison.
This was an issue of conscience, where MPs were urged to vote in line with their own beliefs.
And I'm grateful for this opportunity to place on record my grave concerns about this hurried attempt to significantly alter our nation's abortion laws. We need more time.
There's a difference of principle on the question of the human rights, because there are 2 lives involved in these decisions.
The human right of the woman in terms of carrying a baby is intricately related to the ability of the baby to survive. So if we do not look after women, if we do not protect the well-being of women, there will be no babies either.
Abortion was decriminalised in Northern Ireland in 2019.
Hiya, how are you? Nice to meet you.
But Orla, who had a medical abortion right at the cusp of legal abortions in England and Wales, said the stigma around them still creates barriers to the procedure.
That's me and her, and then you just get little keepsakes really.
She suffered a premature rupture of membranes, went into labour, and she was told she would likely develop sepsis. She made the difficult choice to go through with an abortion and lost her baby daughter at 23 weeks.
I would have died, and my daughter was dying. I could feel her dying. It was a compassionate choice. When we got the post-mortem after, the infection had went into her wee body too, and she had nuclear debris in her lungs. If she had have survived at all, it would have been a very, very painful existence.
At least 100 women have been investigated by police for having an abortion in the past 5 years. This historic vote could mean that now no more will. Serena Barker-Singh, Sky News, Westminster.
Our political correspondent Rob Powell is in Westminster for us tonight. And Rob, a free vote for MPs on a potentially historic decision.
Yeah, MPs not told which way to vote on this one by their party whips. It was classed as a matter of conscience, meaning they can do what they want. And in the end, it sailed through with a huge majority of 240. The majority of the votes in favour came from Labour MPs. You had cabinet ministers like John Healey, the Defence Secretary Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary voting in favour of it. Majority of the cabinet abstained or just didn't vote, though. A majority of the Conservative Party, of the Conservative MPs, voted against. Just 8 Tory MPs supported the change. Most Lib Dems voted in favour, while almost all of Reform voted against, with the exception of Nigel Farage, where there was no vote recorded for him. Now, what it means is that when the Crime and Policing Bill passes through the Commons, through the Lords, and becomes law, this change will go onto the statute book as well, and it will mean that no woman will be investigated, prosecuted, or arrested for having an abortion. Now, there was another change that was potentially on the table when this debate was had earlier, put forward by the Labour backbencher Stella Creasy. It would have gone further than the amendment that was eventually put through, but crucially there was some concern expressed over it by a number of abortion providers and groups who I think felt that the other more gradual approach was the best one to take. It was also backed by other health associations and health groups as well. Now, those behind the change say it's aimed at the very small number of women who do have abortions at later stages of pregnancy. 99% of abortions happen before the 20-week mark. And in the Commons today, there was harrowing stories and testimony, particularly about one woman that was taken from a hospital bed by uniformed police officers and essentially pursued for 4.5 years for abortion-related crimes before eventually being cleared. It's those women that this amendment, this change, is aimed at. There had been some alarm from campaigners at the increasing number, they say, of investigations that had been opened into women for abortion-related crimes, especially since the pandemic and especially since the pills in the post scheme, which essentially allowed early terminations to happen at home. That said, critics on the other side point to schemes like that and the increasing accessibility of abortions at home and say that's why stricter rules were needed. Ultimately, that is not how MPs came down today, though. An overwhelming vote, and one that will see the law change on abortion in the most drastic way for almost 6 decades.
Rob Powell with the latest there from Westminster. Rob, thank you. So Keir Starmer has told Sky News he gets frustrated with politicians who shout and scream but do nothing, as he defended past comments about a grooming gangs inquiry. The government initially resisted calls for a national inquiry, but then changed its position because of a review which found officials had dodged the issue of ethnicity for fear of being called racist. Our social affairs correspondent Becky Johnson reports.
As grooming scandals emerged in towns and cities across Britain, here in Rotherham, they knew the truth. Over 1,000 girls raped and trafficked in this town alone, the majority of their abusers, men of Pakistani heritage. It was all revealed in a report over a decade ago. Authorities tried to cover it up. We now know Whitehall officials tried to help them.
We're Britain's darkest secret.
Elizabeth, who was raped by dozens of Pakistani men from the age of 14, believes the national inquiry is long overdue.
They silence the wrong people, and we need the truth. Why did they do it?
Do you think if the authorities had confronted this issue head-on, that this is an issue predominantly with perpetrators of Pakistani origin, that you might have been spared your abuse?
I would have, going back, the intelligence, everything. I should have never been a victim.
Should the Prime Minister apologise for not calling this inquiry sooner?
Absolutely. And I say that because of the insults as well, that he said, really bad insults about jumping on the right bandwagon.
The Prime Minister hasn't apologised. Instead, he defended his U-turn.
My focus is on the victims on this, not on politicians. I simply gently point out that some of those that allowed this now were the people who did absolutely nothing when they had the opportunity. But I do on the national inquiry, because it is important. That needs to go wherever the evidence takes it.
Louise Casey, whose report revealed the ethnicity of perpetrators have been shied away from, told MPs there needs to be a national reset.
I feel very strongly on issues that are as searing as people's race, when actually we know the prejudice and racism that people of colour experience in this country, to not get how you treat that data right, actually I think is a different level of public irresponsibility.
The Conservative leader held a press conference with the Shadow Home Secretary, surrounded by abuse survivors and their relatives, insisting she wasn't interested in political point scoring.
What I actually want to see is an inquiry that gets to the bottom of this. When I found out that there were 50 towns, and we found out about 4,000 new victims last year, 807 perpetrators, I just could not believe the scale of this. No one has joined the dots. That's what we're talking about now.
Youth worker Jane Senior became a whistleblower to help expose the scale of abuse here in Rotherham.
I was told that it was rocking the multicultural boat. It's about these people now standing up and recognising that we don't just make a presumption that a child is lying because they talk about the most horrendous abuse. We make a presumption that they're telling the truth.
Rotherham is like so many towns where everyone knew grooming was going on, but few in power wanted to talk about it. Here, the authorities aren't just accused of a cover-up. Over the years, there have also been allegations a number of police officers and councillors were involved in the abuse. Rotherham Council accepts there were failings, saying today things are completely different. But this scandal has gone on for so long, some here have lost faith that the full truth will ever emerge. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Rotherham.
Let's go to Ukraine now, where officials say at least 15 people have been killed and more than 150 injured in a Russian missile and drone bombardment. It's the deadliest attack on Kyiv this year, with the main barrage demolishing a 9-story apartment in the capital. President Zelensky described the attack as pure terrorism as he visited the G7 summit of world leaders in Canada, from where Sky's James Matthews reports.
This was the entry into the G7 summit of Ukraine's president, and a welcome from his Canadian host. No smiles, no wonder. Because this is what he'd left behind. Overnight, an apartment block was among targets hit in Kyiv, as Russia launched one of its biggest attacks on his capital since war started. More than 400 drones were fired. This picture captures one before it hit its target. There were multiple fatalities.
Our families had a very difficult night. One of the biggest attacks from the very beginning of this war. It's important for our soldiers to be strong at the battlefield, to stay strong out until Russia will be ready for the peace negotiations. We are ready for the peace negotiations, unconditional ceasefire. I think it's very important, but for this we need pressure.
For the wartime president among G7 members, this was the picture of unity. This wasn't. Donald Trump's departure the night before. The world's biggest economies spoke of maximum pressure on Russia. Without the biggest economy of all, it's a maximum pressure minimized.
You know, sanctions cost us a lot of money.
The G7 heard Trump sidestep sanctions before he left. They showed up this strategy, one short. G7 members here have revealed new sanctions against Moscow. The UK has announced a set of 30 to target Russian finance, its energy sector and its military. It is a significant move by a departing G7 to tackle a world conflict, albeit undermined by an absent president, distracted with another. James Matthews, Sky News, in Kananaskis, Alberta.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, and journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman. Among the stories we'll be discussing this on the front of the eye. Its headline, Trump threatens Supreme Leader of Iran, but won't kill him for now. We'll be right back.